Defending Utah covers the stories others are just too often afraid to touch.
They don't nibble around the edges when it comes to pointing out threats to our liberty. They're not afraid to name names and call out organizations.
This is Defending Utah Radio, every Friday morning at 9 on K-Talk 1640. Defending Utah. Think right and wrong, not right and left. Join Defending Utah, because if you're not already on a government watch list, you should be.
Welcome back to Defending Utah Radio. This is Ben McClintock from defendingutah.org. I'll talk eventually. Where we think right and wrong, not right and left. And I'm so glad to be with you this August 2nd, Friday morning, Freedom Friday, right here on K-Talk AM 1640. If you want to be part of the program, the phone number is 801-254-1640, 801-254-1640. We were talking about this new report that came out, it was published by Yahoo News about the FBI, a new FBI document warning that conspiracy, quote-unquote, theories, of course not fact, that we can prove, are new domestic terrorism threat, is the new threat for domestic terrorism. And just reading further on in this so-called report, it says that the FBI said another factor driving the intensity of this threat is the, quote, uncovering of real conspiracies or cover-ups involving illegal, harmful, or unconstitutional activities by government officials or leading political figures, end of quote. And then the report says the FBI does not specify which political leaders or which cover-ups it was referring to. So it even admits that there are real conspiracies of people doing illegal things, but we're not going to refer to those things. Then the report goes on to say this recent intelligence bulletin comes as the FBI is facing pressure to explain who it considers an extremist. And so, yes, who is it considering an extremist? Anybody that believes, people like David Rockefeller, when he admits in his own autobiography that he is part of a conspiracy working to undermine the best interest of the United States. So, yes, those are people that actually read the words of conspirators. Those are what the FBI considers to be domestic terrorists. Let's go to the phone lines. You can be part of the conversation. Again, 801-254-1640. Caller, you're on K-Talk. This is Ben McClintock from defendingutah.org.
So the previous program, they said that, well, I shouldn't say they, but
mentioned
that we would go into a bankruptcy. Well, in 1933, they did declare bankruptcy, and the judges, according to Howard Freeman, who was friends with Gary Allen and Ezra Taft Benson, and Ezra Taft Benson actually, endorsed Gary Allen's book. There was a paragraph on the back of his book encouraging people to read it.
And he actually recommended it in General Conference, April 1972.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that was as Secretary of Agriculture. So he's writing it in, his capacity, with that as his credential, basically. And so Howard Freeman, Gary Allen, and Ezra Taft Benson used to meet every summer, and they would, they didn't waste their time going to baseball games and basketball games. They studied more important things. And Howard Freeman was brought into town by Bo Gritz years ago, and Howard Freeman said, my people, he quoted the scripture, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Mm-hmm. But so according to Howard Freeman, he said that the judges have been told to take silent notice of the bankruptcy and to apply, I think apply is the wrong word, the public policy of our nation's creditors. Who do you think our nation's creditors are?
We've got lots, I guess, people that are buying the debt. You've got the Chinese. You've got tons of different people that have bought. And the bankers, the international bankers as well, especially. Yeah,
it's the bankers. The bankers are the ultimate creditors. They're the ones that print our money. They're the ones who make money mumbo jumbo out of thin air and then charge us interest on it.
Right.
So anyway, so that's why you can go into court and try to bring up the Constitution, and the judge will just find you in contempt of court.
And that's what we've seen personally. I know Enoch Moore he was told that if he mentioned the Constitution one more time, he'd be arrested.
Well,
and that was just for a traffic infraction. It was crazy.
That is crazy. So that's why these people who really are not our nation's creditors, they're actually traitors and tyrants, and they're not even, most of them aren't even American. That's why they can now tell us that our free speech is restricted. If we try to talk about a conspiracy, which, it's not a conspiracy.
Well, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy fact. It is a conspiracy because a lot of people don't know about it. They try to keep it as secret as possible.
So if we talk about it, now they want to make that illegal. Really, they're the traitors. They're the tyrants. They're the terrorists.
Absolutely.
Not us. So that's all I had to say.
Hey, thanks so much for the call. I appreciate it. I think you're absolutely right on. It is, and that's what they always do. This is a common communist tactic, is to accuse others of what you are doing. And so that way it gets the blame off of you. And so this is exactly what the FBI is doing, is they're claiming that anybody that believes in a conspiracy is a domestic terrorist. And so this is not just the beginning. I mean, everybody's talking about silencing free speech online with the social media platforms. These are just private companies, They can't stop you from saying things. They can't put you in jail. But the FBI, they can. They're the ones that can be the actual traitors of arresting you and taking legal action against you for what you're saying. Simply because you're saying that there is a conspiracy, you are now considered by the FBI a domestic terrorist. Right now, me talking on the radio saying this is a conspiracy makes me a potential domestic terrorist, according to the FBI. 801-254-1640 is the number. I think unless anybody else wants to chime in on that, I think we can go on to the next subject that I wanted to cover here is about education and how it's government education is more like a government church where your children are being indoctrinated into the beliefs of the state. 6, 7, 8 hours a day. And then you think, well, when they come home, I'll be able to debunk all of the social justice warrior propaganda and what's going on. And then they'll be really, set. Right. As if, you're maybe 1 to 2 hours a night after homework, at best, if you're not just watching TV, is going to be able to overcome what they learned the 6, 7, 8 hours at government church all day long. And then, but it's okay. It's okay. They've got Sunday school for an hour on Sunday. That'll fix it. No, that's why we're losing so many youth, and the younger generation are leaving churches. And this has been a key tool because since Utah, since Deseret was founded, understanding this principle based on two separate things. I want to get into those principles and then how important it is what we're seeing, what's going on today in these government churches. Not saying that we're, of course, speaking for any religion, but these are people that I personally respect and what they said and what I think is true. Now, whatever any other faith organization says about that, that's on them. These are my opinions. So, Brigham Young said that I am opposed to free education as much as I am opposed to taking away property from one man and giving it to another. Okay, so just off of that principle, right off the top, government church, government school is a violation of correct and true principle. Joseph Fielding Smith, he said, quote, "It is the will of the Lord, made known shortly after the organization of the church, that steps should be taken to have the children of the members taught in schools conducted under the influence of those who had faith in the gospel," end of quote. So yes, education is very important, but it has to follow key and important principles. And so because, of course, not everybody can afford to go to those types of schools, Brigham Young talked about how he would pay out of his own pocket and encourage others to pay for orphans and other people that were that were poor, that were unable to pay for it. He would pay for their schooling as well to make sure that they were getting education by those that had the Spirit, that had feelings and beliefs consistent with those children and their families. And so in the 1870s, there was a movement. We always think of the movement to get religion out of school being during the 1960s, when they, quote unquote, when the Supreme Court ruled, as if they had the ability to do so, right? As if the Supreme Court had the ability to pass law. They ruled that that prayer was not to be allowed in schools. But in the 1870s, you have the movement to push. There was establishment of these free schools that would prohibit the teaching of religion in schools. And so that was a major thing. And so actually they also talked about how there was legislation passed, the Edmunds-Tucker Act actually prohibited in the state, in the Utah Territory at the time, the use of religious texts in schools. Prohibited. 1800s we're talking about, not the 1960s. And so Brigham Young said this was, what were the establishing? There was two major principles that the founders of Deseret were talking about, that they wanted people to understand of how schools should be run. One of the principles was that free schools by taxation is theft, and two, that only Latter-day Saints should teach Latter-day Saints. Catholics should teach Catholics, etc. That way, if you're a Catholic, you don't want a Latter-day Saint teaching your kid their values. If you're an atheist, you don't want a Latter-day Saint teaching your kid Mormonism, the restored gospel, and vice versa. This is very reasonable. Brigham Young says, quote, "I am opposed to free education as much as I am opposed to taking away property from one man and giving it to another. Would I encourage free schools by taxation? No." So what is this principle that we are under, that we're being taught here? Ezra Taft Benson said, quote, "Occasionally we receive questions as to the propriety of church members receiving government assistance instead of church assistance. Let me restate what is a fundamental principle. Individuals, to the extent possible, should provide for their own needs. Where the individual is unable to care for himself, his family should assist. Where the family is not able to provide, the church should render assistance, not the government. We accept the basic principle that though the people support the government should not support the people." End of quote. And then Boyd K. Packer said, "If a member is unable to sustain himself, then he is to call upon his own family, and then upon the church, and in that order, and not upon the government at all." End of quote. So why is that so important? Why are we not to call upon the government? That is a very, very important principle to understand. H. Verlin Anderson wrote a book called Many Are Called, But Few Are Chosen, and this book was recommended in General Conference in April of 1972, where he explains why government charity is so bad. Education is important. Helping people that are poor is important. So why don't we use the government to support those things? In this book, we quote, says, "Men may exercise unrighteous dominion upon one another through the agency of government in just as many ways as they can when acting outside its framework. The most common method, however, is by denying or interfering with the right to own and control property, one of the elements of freedom. Applying the golden rule, put yourself in A's shoes. He has already given all he desires to charity. Are you not violating his conscience when you compel him to give more? Would you enjoy having someone dictate how much you must give to your church, a hospital, or a college? Would not this be a plain case of theft? And if you pass a law and legalize the taking and the giving, have you really changed the essential nature of the act? Haven't you merely legalized stealing?" End of quote. That is so, no matter how much I feel comfortable contributing my money towards a cause, no matter how noble that cause, I have no right to compel you to do the same thing. To force another to support a cause or an institution is unrighteous dominion, or it's theft. It's wrong. So by that principle alone, government schools fail on their face. But going back to the next principle of making sure that people are taught by those that have their own values. If you're taught by somebody, if you're sending your kids to be taught all day to somebody that doesn't share your values, what are you teaching your child? I'm going to send you all day to somebody that's going to teach you things that I don't agree with. What's your child going to think? That A, are they not important enough to be taught your values all day long? Or are your values not important enough that you're going to send them to somebody else that's going to teach them some other value? Ezra Taft Benson said, quote, "I would rather have my child exposed to smallpox, typhus fever, cholera, or other malignant and deadly diseases than the degrading influence of a corrupt teacher. It is infinitely better to take chances with an ignorant but pure-minded teacher than with the greatest philosopher who is impure." John Taylor said, quote, "And then we want to study also the principles of education and to get the very best teachers we can to teach our children. See that they are men and women who fear God and keep his commandments. We do not want men or women to teach the children of the Latter-day Saints who are not Latter-day Saints themselves. Hear it, you elders of Israel." That was John Taylor. And so we're heading to a break, and so we're going to be continuing on this path and then getting into some of the things that are happening right now, not just in government schools that we all hear about all the time. I will cover some of the new things going on there, but also what's going on at BYU, the infiltration, the destruction of values, that people that send their children there thinking they're going to be taught by people by their own values of what's really going on there. But I wanted to lay the foundation, and as we go into the break, you can learn more about this at defendingutah.org. Clicking on our education tab, we've got a presentation on how the government schools in Utah especially, have been destroying Utah history, just like on a national scale with the U.S. history. Utah's history is being destroyed. Our founders are being maligned. And history is being changed for us to be able to accept the new dogma, the dogma of the state. More when we get back, right here on Defending Utah Radio on K-Talk AM 1640. This Defending Utah presentation brought to you in part by Anderson Accounting, andersonaccounting.com, Trust Plumbing, 801-808-5470, Higher Calling Firearms, highercallingfirearms.com, Pioneer Family Scholars, Black Lotus Web Dev, blacklotuswebdev.com, American Appliance at 801-254-2566, Shem Financial Services, 801-856-6151, and the law offices of Garrett T. Smith, 801-477-1570, and Kangen Water at championsneverquit.biz.
It's a fact. More photos of you are being taken than ever before. Are you ashamed of your smile? At last, a new technology that gives a brighter and healthier smile in under 2 hours. And it's fully warranted, so you'll never have to worry about your smile again. Call Dr. Jeremy Thompson at Thompson Dental, 801-254-0835, or visit GoNewSmile.com, and we'll show you how you can restore your faded, yellowed, or worn teeth without surgery, crowns, or implants. And it's backed by a 30-day, 100% satisfaction money-back guarantee. This scientific breakthrough will painlessly transform your appearance in one visit. The smile you've been waiting for will never cost less or look brighter than it will today. Call 801-254-0835 or visit GoNewSmile.com. That's GONU smile.com to revitalize your smile. New Smile. It looks good on you.
Can't get enough Defending Utah Radio? Then follow us on Facebook and subscribe to Defending Utah's YouTube channel. DefendingUtah.org. Think right and wrong, not right and left.
Speaking of our YouTube channel, we're almost to 1,000 subscribers. We would love it if you could help us get over that milestone by going to the Defending Utah YouTube channel and subscribing there. Also, making sure that if you've got an Android phone, make sure and download our new Defending Utah Radio app for free. And we don't, we're not, there's no spyware. It's all legit on the level. We made sure before we made it that we're not getting any of your information. And so it's a great app to be able to, anytime a new report comes out, just goes right to your phone. You get a notification, downloads right there. and you can check it out. And so it's really important for free that you go and download the Defending Utah Radio app for free on the not the App Store, not the, what's it called, the Google Play Store, right? The App Store on your Android. Want to be a part of the program? 801-254-1640 is the call-in number. I'm your host, Ben McClintock from defendingutah.org, where we think right and wrong, not right and left. And we're talking about government schools and what the founding fathers of Deseret, of what became Utah, taught about that, and those principles of how, what those principles were and how that's led us to the situation that we're on today, where even at BYU, they are teaching social justice. At BYU, you have professors teaching that we need to get rid of the proclamation on the family and the roles of gender. So I'm going to get to that. But I want to lay that foundation first that we've been talking about, those two principles that education should follow, that it shouldn't be done through theft, that it's, free schools by taxation is theft, and that people should be taught by those with their values. If you're an atheist, you should be taught by an atheist. If you're a Latter-day Saint, you should be taught by a Latter-day Saint. If you're a Catholic, you should be taught by a Catholic, etc. Because your values, your children's values are so important that to have anybody else teach them somebody else's values is crazy. Your values are important, and your values should be what instilled in your children. And so, speaking to Latter-day Saints, and this is, John Taylor said, this is powerful, and I think this should hit home to people. He says, quote, I am told in the Revelations to bring up my children in the fear of God. Now we are engaged in building our temples that we may become united and linked together by eternal covenants that shall exist in all time and throughout all eternity. And then, when we have done all this, go and deliberately turn our children over to whom? To men who do not believe the gospel, to men who, according to your faith, are never going to the celestial kingdom of God, and you will turn your children over to them? And you call yourselves Latter-day Saints, do you? I will suppose a case. You expect to be saved in the celestial kingdom of God. Well, supposing your expectations are realized, which I sometimes doubt, and you look down somewhere in a terrestrial or telestial kingdom, as the case may be, and you see your children, the offspring that God had given you, to train up in his fear, to honor him and to keep his commandments. And supposing they could converse with you, that what would be their feelings towards you? It would be, Father, Mother, you are to blame for this. I would have been with you if you had not tampered with the principles of life and salvation in permitting me to be decoyed away by false teachers who taught incorrect principles. And this is the result of it. But then I very much question men and women's getting into the celestial kingdom of God who have no more knowledge about principles of life and salvation than to go and tamper with the sacred offspring, the principle of life which God entrusted to your care, to thus shuffle it off to imbibe the spirit of unbelief, which leads to destruction and death. Wow. That to me is powerful, of this principle, of the fact that your principles are important, whether you're a Latter-day Saint or not. Why would you want somebody else to instill their principles, not yours, into your children? Boyd K. Packer said, quote, in many places it is literally not safe physically for youngsters to go to school. And in many schools, and it's becoming almost generally true, it is spiritually unsafe to attend public schools. Look back over the history of education to the turn of the century, and the beginning of the educational philosophies. Pragmatism and humanism were the early ones, and they branched out into a number of other philosophies which have led us now into a circumstance where our schools are producing the problems that we face. That was Boyd K. Packer just about 20 years ago that he said this. And so these are key principles. We have, in fact, you have in the 1880s, you had a Protestant organization and you had a Anglican organization. Both had their conferences where they bragged about how they were setting up these free schools in Utah, free, right? And so that they were doing some fundraisers to be able to set up these schools in Utah, to be able, because they said they were the best missionary tool in taking away the children away from the faith of their fathers. because the Latter-day Saints were not paying attention to what was being taught to them, and they didn't want to pay money, and so they were sending their kids to either government schools or like, hey, at least it's a religious school, I'm going to go send them over here, and be taught by somebody that didn't believe what they believed. And we're seeing the fruits of that, okay? I'm going to give you an example of, just a even more recent example of this being implemented. When you turn away from these principles and you send your kids to be taught by those that don't have your values, because for some reason you're teaching them that your values aren't important enough to be taught to them all day long, that somebody else's values are more important. This is what they're being taught. This is what these new social justice warrior teachers are teaching children. They become activists. These activists become teachers. And they said, quote, "We're training school teachers to completely smash heteronormativity," meaning that heterosexuality is normative, is normal. This is from let's see here, from an article quoting some of these LGBT activists. They said that their goal is to make sure that LGBTQ ideology is an everyday occurrence within the government school system. But the bottom line, as this activist puts it, is to train teachers to completely smash heteronormality. Last year, Hobson, this activist, told the BBC that she conditioned school children as young as 6 to accept LGBTQ ideology while they're young and impressionable, so they'll be less likely to accept a Christian view of sexuality later on in life. One method Hobson employs is requiring her young pupils to write a gay love letter from one male character to another male character. The school has adopted non-gender specific uniforms, so they're getting rid of gender specifically and making it, taking away all those divine and eternal differences. These activists seem more passionate about indoctrinating our children than we are about protecting and actually educating them. Okay, this is what's been going on. This has been going on. 20 years ago, I actually was in the school system. And once a week, they would do some kind of slideshow with photographs. I'm not talking drawings. Like when I was in school as a student, when you took family life and biology, and they would just have little drawings of the genitalia and biology and whatnot. But when I was involved in the instruction end of the schools in the government school system, before I realized what was the truth behind the government church, behind the government schools, so I was involved in the education part of that. And once a week, the head teacher would instruct the class and do a slideshow of actual photographs. Actual photographs of every, when I say every, I mean every sex act. And I won't do it for radio. I won't describe them for radio. But just know that every single sex act was projected onto the wall for the children to see. And I thought this was outrageous. And at the time, this was in the state of California. And in the state of California, it is illegal for people that weren't parents of students to, even though they were taxpayers and paying for the curriculum, they couldn't look at the curriculum. And so I secretively sent the information to a local radio talk show host like this, right? Causing trouble even back then. And it caused a huge uproar, thankfully, because people aren't crazy, at least at first. Until things started to calm down, they started to explain why this was necessary. It was important to show pictures, photographs of every single sex act imaginable on the wall to these kids, because if they didn't see that, they wouldn't know if they were being abused. That was the excuse that I was given. In fact, and I was when it was discovered who it was, I was dragged into the superintendent's office and threatened. And then when I was sent back to the class, the head teacher said, quote, "If this happens again, I can't guarantee your protection," end of quote. This is what's going on in the government schools today. Let's go to the phone lines before we move on. 801-254-1640 is the number. Go to line 5 first. Line 5, you're on K-Talk with Ben McClintock from defendingutah.org.
Hey, Ben. What I'm hearing today is pretty good. I like it. And
I don't know if you can move to a different location. Your phone's really choppy.
I apologize. I'm in a bad area here.
That's much better. Stay right there. Don't move. Go ahead and talk.
I'm going to stay right. Okay. You think in the national schools they would teach civics class, but they don't.
No.
You think they would teach more about the Constitution and focus more on that, but no, they no longer. It's barely a paragraph. The Civil War, World War I, World War II, anything that, would teach something, the foundation of what is America, the United States of America, the Constitution, and so on. Mm-hmm. But instead, what they're going to be doing here, and I'm going to be real careful with my words, they're nationalizing the Holocaust class program throughout the schools, and they're having a conference, and they're bringing in all the school teachers into this conference, and they're shipping them all into wherever it is. I can't remember where. Mm-hmm. But they're going to be sleep deprived. They're going to be out of there, ready for the indoctrination, and they're going to bring the best and the brightest people that are knowledgeable about the Holocaust from all over the world for this week-long conference that teach these teachers how to teach about the Holocaust. Of all things that are going on in this world, why are they pressing this to be nationalized? It's already a thing in Florida. If you remember Parkland High School, a lot of the kids came out and they were going, I was in Holocaust class at the time, and that's the first time I ever heard of it, but now it's going to be a national thing. So not teaching the principles of what is our values, we're going to now be taught the principles of other people's values from all over the world on teachers that are sleep deprived and ready for the indoctrination.
Wow.
That's all I got for you.
Hey, thanks so much. Yeah, the government schools, the government is not going to be teaching a way to be able to have you understand how to keep them in check. We need to understand that. So we were talking about the schools, and if you want to be a part of that, what's going on here, we've been talking about those principles that we were founded upon here in the state of Utah. Of how taxation to fund government schools, government churches is immoral, and how you should have your values taught to your children, not somebody else's values. That seems very basic, but of course those things aren't happening. And in fact, you would think, okay, yeah, that's great. If when my kids find I've done these things, I've either homeschooled them or I've found a great private school that teaches my values. Now that they're in college, I'm going to send them off to BYU, and they're going to continue on with this faith-filled education. I'm sorry to break it to you, but you're wrong. This BYU has become just as dangerous to your values, if you're a Latter-day Saint, than any government church there's out there today. Because why? Well, where do the instructors come from? They come from the government schools. Where are they taught? The universities, where they are propagandized, and they become converted to the religion of the state. And so there's put together a list of just going through social media of BYU professors and what they are preaching. We are about to go to the break, and so I want to give you just a little bit of a. I'm going to the top of the hour break, and so I just want to give you a little bit of a teaser right there of what one BYU professor is teaching. There's over a dozen of them teaching this right now, and there's programs at BYU. They've got on the wall, one of the buildings there at BYU, they are proclaiming that Joseph Smith was a socialist under the teachings of Robert Owen. Even though Joseph Smith went to a class taught by one of Robert Owen's disciples, and he said, I don't believe the doctrine, BYU has a display claiming that he's a Robert Owen socialist. And then we've got, that's on the wall there. Now we've got Adam Durfee, who is a BYU professor, says, quote, on Twitter, as a heterosexual white man of privilege, I promise to do all I can to change my broken community. For we are truly broken. Okay, so that is what one of the professors at BYU said. Now, a couple of years ago, we actually covered this. We did a program where there was a BYU professor that was saying that, quoting on one of our YouTube videos, that Ezra Taft Benson was dumb and that he was wrong and that nobody should follow what he taught. What in the world is going on with that? Why would BYU, a school that is based on, of course, it's owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that the church has condemned socialism. Joseph Smith said that he, condemned the doctrine and he didn't believe the doctrine, and then they later on church leaders called it the biggest satanical threat to peace and prosperity that we have today and to the gospel.
That was an official publication of the church where they called it that.
An official first presidency statement that they called it that, yeah.
Right.
And a publication that they printed and distributed through the home teaching program. And so why would a school that has that as its background be promoting that? So we had Hannah Stoddard of the Joseph Smith Foundation on the program to discuss that. And I know that so that poll that went out, it was said that it wasn't as reliable as they thought at first, because not just BYU students could participate in the poll, so it wasn't accurate as just BYU students. But what was interesting, and we just wrote an article we published at defendingutah.org about that, about the response that we got to our program, because there was actually a BYU professor that was upset that we would dare discuss what the actual teachings of the church were on the subject. And this professor at BYU, his name is Christian Clement of the German. He's He's an associate professor of German studies there at BYU. And when we posted the program with Hannah Stoddard discussing these things, he commented on our YouTube channel, at the Defending Utah's YouTube channel, and his first comment was, this is from Christian Clement, a BYU professor of German studies at BYU. He said, President Benson obviously was not an intellectual giant, so we have to forgive him. I'm sure there in the afterlife he is terribly embarrassed about many things he said and wrote while he was alive. More about that when we get back from the... This Defending Utah presentation brought to you in part by Anderson Accounting, andersonaccounting.com, Trust Plumbing, 801-808-5470, Higher Calling Firearms, highercallingfirearms.com, Pioneer Family Scholars, Black Lotus Web Dev, blacklotuswebdev.com, American Appliance at 801-254-2566, Shem Financial Services, 801-856-6151, and the law offices of Garrett T. Smith, 801-477-1570, and Kangen Water at championsneverquit.biz.
It's a fact. More photos of you are being taken than ever before. Are you ashamed of your smile? At last, a new technology that gives a brighter and healthier smile in under 2 hours. And it's fully warranted, so you'll never have to worry about your smile again. Call Dr. Jeremy Thompson at Thompson Dental, 801-254-0835, or visit GoNewSmile.com, and we'll show you how you can restore your faded, yellowed, or worn teeth without surgery, crowns, or implants. And it's backed by a 30-day, 100% satisfaction money-back guarantee. This scientific breakthrough will painlessly transform your appearance in one visit. The smile you've been waiting for will never cost less or look brighter than it will today. Call 801-254-0835 or visit GoNewSmile.com. That's GONU smile.com to revitalize your smile. New smile. It looks good on you.
So we've been talking, we continue on from the last hour, the subject of the government, what's been going on in the government schools, and we've got Christian Clements, who is a professor at BYU, saying that Ezra Taft Benson was wrong and that he was stupid, and going over BYU professors. BYU is infested with social justice warriors as professors, socialist communists as professors, those that are working to undermine every aspect, every principle that you've tried to instill into your children. And then you send them off to BYU thinking they're safe, they're going to build their testimonies, And then they get there and they're taught evolution, they're taught the LGBTQ lifestyle, they're taught socialism. They've got a big old display saying that Joseph Smith was a Robert Owen socialist, etc. And then all of their professors are parroting these lines, and it's something that we've got to be more aware of, and help to protect and to instill our children's instill in our children our values. Now, yes, as they grow up, they have to start to make their own choices, and they have to decide what they believe themselves. But the problem here is, if they're sent off to the University of Utah, if they're sent off to, Stanford, if they, whatever other university besides BYU, Idaho, BYU, Provo, BYU, Hawaii, besides those schools, or LDS Business College, right? Anywhere besides those schools, if you're a Latter-day Saint, you're going to say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to have to defend my faith if I go to UC Berkeley," right? You don't expect to have your values taught to you there. But if you go to BYU, you have the assumption, I think most people have the assumption that all of the classes are going to be taught with a gospel perspective. But that's not the case anymore. We played the clip from the professor commenting on one of our YouTube channels. We're going to go through over a dozen professors that are teaching the religion of the state, of the social justice, communist, socialist lifestyles. If you want to chime in, you got a question, got a comment, give us a call. 801-254-1640 is the number. 801-254-1640 is the phone number to chime in. Adam Durfee says he's a BYU, again, professor, posted on Twitter, "As a heterosexual man of white privilege, I promise to do all I can to change my broken community. For truly, we are broken," right? Because heterosexuals, just being heterosexual and white means you're broken, okay? Now we have Jason Kerr, the humanities professor, quoting, replying to a feminist named Barbara Brown. So Barbara Brown says, "But that's the problem right there. Preside means to be an authority over, to be in charge of. We can try to pretend that preside doesn't mean inequality, but in fact it does." And so talking about the LDS, teaching of the idea of presiding either in a family or in a calling, or in church activity, saying that they're in charge of is, this horrible thing. And so humanities professor Jason Kerr says, yes, that's right. The only option we have, as long as the proclamation on the family is on the books, is to define it toward oblivion, dictionaries notwithstanding. Okay? A BYU professor who has to go through a process saying that he sustains the leaders and that he sustains the teachings, he wants to define the proclamation of on the family out of existence. Doesn't matter what the dictionary definitions of words say. The proclamation of the family that distinguish between male and female, and that there are divine roles for each of those genders and each of those sexes, and that we all have divine roles. He wants to define that out of existence and merge everybody into one homogeneous gender. And he also, he is constantly preaching his social justice warrior activities. He's responding to another social justice warrior who said, "When I think of what Heavenly Mother might be like, I think there's a very good chance she's a black queer woman who laughs with her whole body and speaks in a soft voice and swears constantly." And then the BYU professor, Jason Kerr, says, "Preach it. That is honestly the most beautiful theology I've ever heard, or I've heard in a while." And then he says, people were upset with him for saying this, and so his response was, "It appears that some of my co-religionists think that I'm a danger to my church, and therefore should not teach at my university. This is because I affirmed that the image of God might be manifest in a queer black woman who swears a lot." You think? A BYU professor that says that he believes that God might be manifest in a queer black woman who swears a lot. And he admits that he's an LDS. So these are the professors. This is just a sampling of a couple of professors at BYU. Then you've got Edward Carter, who is a professor at BYU and is the director of the School of Communications at BYU. And he is preaching the social justice warrior mantra as well. It's fundamental that we understand the importance, both for good and for evil, that schools can be, and how that BYU, we think would be supporting these things, are actually eroding our families' understanding of liberty. We have another BYU professor of humanities, Heather Benlap, and who meets regularly, hangs out with Gloria Steinem, who's a huge abortionist, pro-infanticide even. And she is somebody that's hanging out regularly with that and supporting those things. She is in favor of massive gun confiscation as well and promoting that at BYU. You have another humanities professor, Joe Campbell. He was supporting return to feminism at BYU, and that and supporting the idea of that helping to bring about feminism and which leads to abortion on demand. Then you have promoting with their open socialism and their support of the social justice mentality of promoting not only socialism, but trying to get rid of the Proclamation of the Family, promoting homosexuality, the getting rid of the honor code at BYU. We've got more people that want to be part of the conversation. 801-254-1640 is the number. Go back to line 5. You're on K-Talk. This has Ben McClintock from defendingutah.org.
Hey, I really appreciate what you're doing, and I want to be able to codify and quantify this issue of the LGBT thing,
yeah,
if I might. First of all, in the biota, the only purpose for sexuality is to perpetuate the species. Let me say that again. The only purpose for sexuality in the biota is to perpetuate the species.
Now, for myself and for our listeners, what's the biota?
That means the living system in the biosphere on the Earth, all
gotcha.
the living systems. And whether it's a grasshopper or a butterfly or a fish, sexuality is there to perpetuate the species.
Right. Yep.
So anyway, I think that many times we get so many people talking about things, we forget. But let's
let me put you on hold. We're going to a hard break. I'm going to put you on hold, and we'll hold you over and get you right back when we get back.
Okay.
Tired of bureaucrats and tyrannical government? Defending Utah knows how to fix that. It's called nullification. To find out more, stop by our office and pick up your pamphlet on nullification today. defendingutah.org. Think right and wrong, not right and left.
This Defending Utah presentation brought to you in part by Anderson Accounting, andersonaccounting.com, Trust Plumbing, 801-808-5470, Higher Calling Firearms, highercallingfirearms.com, Pioneer Family Scholars, Black Lotus Web Dev, blacklotuswebdev.com, American Appliance at 801-254-2566, Shem Financial Services, 801-856-6151, and the law offices of Garrett T. Smith, 801-477-1570, and Kangen Water at championsneverquit.biz.
It's a fact. More photos of you are being taken than ever before. Are you ashamed of your smile? At last, a new technology that gives a brighter and healthier smile in under 2 hours. And it's fully warranted, so you'll never have to worry about your smile again. Call Dr. Jeremy Thompson at Thompson Dental, 801-254-0835, or visit GoNewSmile.com, and we'll show you how you can restore your faded, yellowed, or worn teeth without surgery, crowns, or implants. And it's backed by a 30-day, 100% satisfaction money-back guarantee. This scientific breakthrough will painlessly transform your appearance in one visit. The smile you've been waiting for will never cost less or look brighter than it will today. Call 801 254-0835 or visit gonewsmile.com. That's GONU smile.com to revitalize your smile. New Smile. It looks good on you.
Welcome back to Defending Utah Radio, right here on K-Talk AM 1640. I'm your host, Ben McClintock from defendingutah.org, where we think right and wrong, not right and left. And I've been speaking about the foundations of education, the importance of sticking to correct principles regarding education, and how not only in government schools being used to get rid of gender norms and get rid of actual biology. You know, they always call people science deniers because they don't believe in the propaganda on man-made global warming that's, causing the ice caps on Mars to melt. But when it comes to gender and biology, they are the ones that are completely anti-science. Well, they're always anti-science, but we've got these. It's even happening at BYU, where we have all these professors that are saying we need to get rid of the Proclamation on the family, we need to get rid of gender. You have Lee Essig, who is a professor of family life, who actually mentioned on Twitter that he says, quote, that we found the adherence to traditional masculine attitudes had a negative effect across several domains of father involvement. And then he says that there is a negative aspects of masculinity and how it impacts fathering. And then somebody else and said that he retweeted a comment that said toxic masculinity implies the existence of healthy masculinity. This just isn't just a meme; it's literally the whole point. Nobody's saying all masculinity is toxic, and so they're saying that this idea that gender and gender roles are, as a BYU professor who's supposed to believe the things that the sponsoring or church teaches, they are preaching openly and defiantly against those things and trying to change those things. We've got a caller on hold that is kind enough to hold over from the break talking about this biological aspect of these things. So thanks again for holding over the break. Go ahead and continue.
Well, you're very kind. Anyway, just to reiterate a little bit, to catch up, the whole purpose of sexuality in the biota, that's in the biosphere, that's in the living areas of the earth. You learned about there's different spheres of the earth, is to perpetuate the species. And so it raises and begs the question, how can two individuals, whether it be a butterfly or a fish, of the same sex, perpetuate the species?
It's impossible.
Well, they can't. And so what happens unless you, in the human realm, unless you use a turkey baster, did I say that? I'll give my disclaimer, in my opinion, which I'm entitled to, the gene pool will be cleansed in a generation because there will be no perpetuation of the species. Mm-hmm. In fact, LGBT and homosexuality is a degraded form of biology. Let me say that again. It's a degraded form of biology because it can't perpetuate the species. And so what happens then, it is against nature's law. Let me say that again. It's against nature's law, which is also against God's law. Mm-hmm. And Darwin was right on one thing, and that is the perpetuation of the species is the fact that the strongest survive. It's a continual improvement. That's why the antlered animals butt heads, and that means survival of the strongest, the best. And so when it's a degradation of both nature's law and God's law, what have we got? We've got degradation, and the species can't perpetuate. Now, there's one other thing that I want to talk about, if I might, and that is you were talking about, or at least communism, and how we got all this social justice and I just drew a blank.
That's okay. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Cultural Marxism, all that stuff, yeah.
Yes. Well, as far back as 1928, the communists declared that the cultural, economic, and social differences between the races in America could be exploited by them to create the animosity, the fear, and the hatred between large segments of our people that would be necessary beginning ingredients for a revolution. And there were three basic objectives, and I'll just hurry and put them through. The first is to create hatred. Mm-hmm. The second is to trigger violence. And the third is to overthrow established government.
Yes.
And so if I could just elaborate a little bit on those.
Which mirror, going back all the way to the 1700s, of the stated purposes of the Bavarian Illuminati, and they've continued the same exact goals, which is why the communists celebrate May Day.
That's right. And the only way you can do this is to get disruption in the people, mm-hmm. in the communities.
Yep.
Anyway, if you take create hatred, they stated use any means to agitate blacks into hating whites and whites into hating blacks, work both sides of the split, play mm-hmm. up and exaggerate real grievances, and if necessary, don't hesitate to manufacture false stories and rumors about injustices and brutality. Create mm-hmm. martyrs for both sides. Play upon mass emotions until they smolder with resentment. And then
that sounds like the creation of fake news, right, that we see today.
Oh, absolutely. And that's Old Scratch's whole thing is for violence and disruption. Yeah. He started it with the big family home he needed in the sky when he was kicked out. Anyway, second, trigger violence. Put the emotional masses into the streets in the form of large mobs. The larger the better. It makes no difference if the mob is told to demonstrate peacefully, so long as it is brought into direct confrontation with the antagonist. Merely bringing the two emotional charged groups together is like mixing oxygen and hydrogen. All that is needed is one tiny spark. If the spark is not forthcoming from purely spontaneous causes, create it. Look at what we had in Baltimore. Anyway, and then lastly, I'm taking too much time, but I wanted to put these points out because it's happening.
No, that's good.
Anyway, overthrow established government. Once the mob violence becomes widespread and commonplace, condition those who are emotionally involved to accept violence as the only way to settle the score once and for all. Provide leadership and training for guerrilla warfare. Institute discipline and terrorism to ensure at least passive support from the larger and active segment of the population. Train and battle-harden leadership through sporadic riots and battles with police. Finally, at the appointed time, launch an all-out simultaneous offensive in every major city. And so what's the aftermath of this? And we're seeing it right now where you can't even go into segments of the city. Police and National Guard units will never be adequate to handle such widespread anarchy, mm-hmm. especially if a large part of our men and equipment are drained away in fighting foreign wars. Anyway, I wrote these things down. I couldn't stand it. And guess where I took these things from?
I've heard it before. I can't remember where it's from. Where's it from?
The Communist Manifesto.
There you go.
It's straight out of it. Anyway, I just want to say civil rights is a tool of communist deception, and that's what we're all banking on. Thanks for your you're therapeutic. I feel much better now.
Good. I'm glad I could help. Appreciate it. Thank you for the call.
Okay, bye now.
Bye-bye. Let's go to the next phone lines. The next call, line 3. If you want to be a part of the conversation, 801-254-1640. Line 3, you're on K-Talk with Ben McClintock from defendingutah.org.
Sound like he was describing a marriage breakup. Well, anyway, Paul was on one morning, and he said that up there on the left temple, they don't care about guns, whether we have them or we don't. They preferably that we don't. So that's kind of an eye-opener. All right, thanks.
Interesting. Thank you. So I appreciate all of the calls that have been on this. We've been but it's kind of winding things up on the topic of education. It's so important that we have the ability to be able to be taught how to think, not what to think. And unfortunately, what's going on is we see what's going on right now is with the social justice warrior mentality that's being put into the schools, the government schools from K-12 all the way up now, not only to public universities, but to private universities, even church-owned universities that have these professors that are teaching these things and making it. And so throughout your life, you are taught that if you disagree with this, then you are the bad person. It's not. It's a dogma as much, which goes to the point of what I mentioned even as things started was the church. It's not even church school. Government school. It's a government church. Government schools are a government church that is 6 to 8 hours a day, and your child is being indoctrinated in the religion of the state. And it is being treated as dogma because if you go against the official dogma, then you are punished. How I mentioned when I went against the official dogma as an employee, that the other people, the other employees of the government church, couldn't guarantee my protection. Going back right to the Middle Ages, not witch trials, but the I can't remember this. That's blocked my mind, but where the Catholic Church would put to death dissenters. That's exactly what the government churches, the government schools of today are doing. And we're seeing this being done all the time. Let's go back to line 5. You're on K-Talk with Ben McClintock from defendingutah.org.
Yes, I was wondering, does President Nelson and all the brethren in Salt Lake know what's going on in BYU?
I don't know the answer to that, but I can give you a couple of examples that might shed some more light. So Cleon Skousen tells a story about when David O. McKay was the president of the church, and David O. McKay asked him to let him know who some communist professors were back then and during those days. And unfortunately, nothing was done. And then you go to Ezra Taft Benson's days. He wrote a letter to the New American Magazine asking for a list of people that were, professors that were communists and that were teaching things contrary to what the mission of the university is. And he got that list, but he, for some reason, couldn't do anything about it. So whether they know or not, I don't know. But it seems like even if they know, there's a process that they don't have absolute power over who teaches and what they're able to teach there at the university, unfortunately.
Okay, well, thank you for that answer.
Yep.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate the call.
I've enjoyed your program. Are you going to be on every Friday?
Every Friday, 9 to 11.
9 to 11. Very good. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate
Goodbye.
the call. Bye-bye. If you want to be a part of the conversation of any radio program right here on K-Talk, the phone number is 801-254-1640 is the phone number. And if you've missed any part of our program or want to make sure that you're listening to, that you can go back and hear past programs, and you've got a smartphone, not an iPhone, but an Android phone, download the Defending Utah radio app. And that way, whenever a new report, a new radio program comes up, it's downloaded, it notifies you, and you can listen to it at your convenience while you're driving down the road, while you're doing your exercise, whatever it is that you do. Make sure that you are downloading the Defending Utah radio app onto your Android phone. That's really important, and it's completely free. And we're able to produce this radio program and produce all of our tools and materials because of our great supporting members. And so if you like what we're doing and you want to make sure that it's perpetuated and that it can grow, make sure and go to defendingutah.org today, and you click on the membership tab, and you become a member of Defending Utah. And what we're doing right now is, in addition to the regular perks of membership, like 2 or 4 day classes to front sight weapons training down in Vegas, as well as our regular training programs and our great bulletin and tools that we produce, we're providing all new members our new member pack of our Defending Utah shirt, which has our Ezra Taft Benson quote that says, "The Constitution will be saved, but it won't be saved in Washington," because we've got to do that right here. It's our responsibility. All of our booklets are The Proper Role of Government by Ezra Taft Benson, where the first half of the book reprints his talk. The second half of the book, it gets into all of our we go through the 15 principles that Benson lays out and explain where they came from, what founding fathers taught about those things, and how to apply them today. Our booklets on natural law, on secret combinations nationally, as well as our booklet on them here in Utah, as well as our DVDs. We've got a great DVD with our presentations from our annual conferences. A talk by Ammon Bundy, talking about what happened to his family and the principles that he's laid out. A great talk by Hans Andersen, that where he actually goes over his experience serving on a grand jury that indicted the Federal Reserve